when a buyer says, sorry, that's against company policy, or this is our company policy, we're unable to do that, that's not the end of the negotiation. What they're doing is they're testing your resolve. They're seeing what you're going to do with that if you're going to come back. Today, I want to talk about 3 tactics that we often encounter from buyers. So if you are a professional seller or somebody in business development and you come up against buyers regularly, particularly professional buyers, so people who work for procurement departments, typically representing large organizations, they're very fond of using many different tactics. And what are these tactics all fundamentally designed to do is to get you to lower your expectations or to moderate your expectations and to improve the quality of the deal for your counterpart. That's what's behind all of these tactics, right? So we'll look at 3 of those, and then we'll also talk about how to counter or how to respond to those tactics. So let's start with the print and policies one, which is often used around things like payment terms. It's our corporate policy, 60-day payment terms, or quality assurance, or whatever it might be. And often it is the case, it may well be the company's policy, but they will have many exceptions to that policy because, of course, not all vendors are made of the same quality or offer them the same number of different choices. So for the very strong vendors, let's say single source vendors, they often will have very, very competitive, let's say, policy arrangements or exceptions to the policies that companies might have, like payment terms, etc. So companies generally do have a lot of flexibility to come up with exceptions to policies. So I always, and we do a lot of business with large corporations, I will always ask them what the opportunities are for gaining exceptions to those policies, what the opportunities are that we can maybe trade things off against those policies. And you'll be surprised, 80-90% of the time when we enter into agreements with companies, I do manage to get exceptions to policies or adjustments to policies just because I ask. And, I ask, clever way of doing it, but of course, one thing you must always remember when you respond to any tactic is the key is to let your counterpart save face, right? So, but one of the great ways to counter a policy objection, if you will, is to ask to see a copy of the policy in the first place. And sometimes if you ask to see a copy of the policy, you've got to frame it the right way. You've got to say, look, obviously internally in the organization, this is not, according to our standard way of doing business. So if your policy demands, let's say 90-day payment terms, I will have to take that internally for further review. So it would be great if I can have a copy of the policy. See, you do it that way. And then you'll discover in some cases that people will come back to you and they'll say, well, it's okay. Maybe the policy doesn't have to apply in this case if it's not really a policy, right? Because you've given them the opportunity to save face. You've not called them out on it, if you will. You've not said, okay, that's not a policy. I'm quite sure that's not a policy that you have in place. So that's the first thing to do. And then the second thing to do is if the policy is genuine, if it's real, then you ask for an exception. And you ask people for help. Don't always try to claim value. It's more important to create value before you can claim value. So see what there is that they can do to assist you to deal with those policies and procedures, right? It's also a good tactic to use, obviously, on your side when you're dealing with organizations. The fact that something, is a corporate policy seems like it makes it, kind of more valuable. It holds more authority if something's written down. So it's good to have some of these policies in place, and you can maybe, support some of your proposals through providing copies of some of the policies that you have in place in your organization. Particularly if you're a smaller organization, it might be a good idea for you to, create a digest or create a table of elements that it might be good to resolve policies around, like lead days or exception policies or payment term policies, whatever it might be, because that makes the validity and the veracity of your argument seem more compelling when you can support an argument with something that is supported by a corporate policy or a procedure. Right, the second tactic I want to talk about is the hot potato. Now, this is a tactic, you'll be familiar with this one, right? What do you do when you get the hot potato? Somebody gives you the hot potato, you want to get rid of it, right? You don't want to hold on to the hot potato, you want to return it to them, you want to pass it on. Problem is, if you take that hot potato, then it's yours and you have to deal with it. This sometimes cuts two ways, this tactic. Often your counterpart, particularly professional buyers, they'll just say to you, look, I'm sorry, we don't have the budget. What they're effectively doing by saying they don't have the budget is they're making their lack of budget your problem. This is how they hand you the hot potato. So the trick is not to take the hot potato. If they say, I'm sorry, we just don't have that budget, then your response should simply be something like, okay, what is it that we can cut out of this scope? Maybe we can start somewhere small. Maybe there are ways for you to raise more budget or to qualify for an increase in budget, from finance, if you can write a good motivation, etc. But don't take the problem on. It's not your problem that they don't have the budget, right? It is your problem to find a way to engage them at the level of engagement that they can afford or that they target. Also remember that, of course, when people give you the hot potato, typically if you're dealing with professional buyers, if they say to you that they don't have the budget or that their budget is way below the offer that you submitted, you must also remember, of course, that's their aspiration base, right? They don't expect you to just agree to that number. It's very unlikely that they do, particularly if they're professional buyers and they're negotiating every day. They're setting themselves a target, right? So they're hoping to be able to achieve that purchase price, but they're not expecting that you're just going to agree to it. So be careful with the hot potato. Don't take it on, because if you do, then you'll be held responsible. This is the flip side how it works. Often procurement, they also run into the problem where they get the hot potato from their internal departments, right? So an internal department will say, listen, you need us to help purchase X, Y, and Z, and this is our budget. So let's say they said they have a 50,000 euro or $50,000 budget, but you're calling for proposals now. Let's say you're working for the professional procurement department on behalf of this internal division, and you're calling for proposals, and all the proposals come in at 100 or 150,000 euro, and you only have a budget of 50,000 euro. But what you've done is you've taken on the assignment. You're stuck with that hot potato. So one of the first things to do, of course, is to understand, maybe in that context, listen, when we go to market, typically solutions will be priced around 100K, not 50K. So I can't go to market if your budget is only 50K. You need to raise more budget. The whole point is you don't want to take on that hot potato. You want to make sure you don't get caught with a hot potato. So you just hand it back. The second, the third tactic I want to talk about today is the vice, right? And the vice, it's this tool that you have in a workshop. If you want to put a pipe or something in there, it's like a clamp, and you can make it tighter and tighter so that you can work on whatever it is that you've clamped between the two, I suppose, the teeth of the vice. But what it means is that the buyer, let's just say you're sitting across the table from a professional buyer now, will ask you to improve your offer without giving you a target. So they'll say something like, listen, I need you to sharpen your pencil. We need to lower the price some more. It's too much. We can't afford it. And then let's say you go sharpen your pencil, you make a concession or two, you reduce your price, you come back, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to say, that's great, but I need you to do more. We need to stretch some more. So, and what they're going to do is they're going to continue to ask until you say no, because you will never hit their target. It's a moving target, right? The vice is specifically designed. It's trying to squeeze as much juice from you as possible. So the way to respond to the vice, if somebody says to you, listen, you need to improve your offer, it's not good enough, or your competition's offers are better, you have to ask them for a target. You have to say something like, look, I can do my best to improve this offer, but I need to know what I'm aiming at. It might not be possible for me to improve our offer to meet your requirements or to meet your needs. So, can you give me an insight into what I need to do? What's the target that I'm after? Of course, the target that they're going to give you will also be an aspiration. It won't be what we call the real base or the minimum acceptable level. It'll be their ideal level. So it's probably not the thing that you need to give them either. But the point is, you need to come back and ask them to give you a target. You can't just respond. You can't just make concessions unilaterally and unreciprocated, right? So you want to come back also, if you do improve your terms, you want to come back with connecting that improvement in terms to something else, a counter concession from your counterpart, maybe enhanced payment terms, maybe increased scope, I don't know, anything else that might add value to you, potentially something like, referrals, testimonials, whatever it might be, that you need to include in any concession that you're going to offer. So with these tactics, once again, just remember, we've looked at three. We've looked at print and policies. It's one often used by large organizations. It's one often underutilized by small companies. So you can greatly enhance maybe the authority of your proposals by incorporating some policy or policy statements as part of your proposal. Then we spoke about the hot potato. Remember, you don't want to get caught with a hot potato. You want to make sure you hand it right back. And then lastly, we spoke about the vice. And the key point there is you always need to ask for a target. Anybody ever ask you to improve your offer? You have to say to them, oh, what am I aiming at? You can't make a concession without knowing what you're aiming at. And make sure that you tie that to a counter concession or a reciprocal trade, if you will. So hope that helps you.